All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited. We are winding down season 2. Today's episode is episode 32. Only 2 more episodes to go. I was trying to reach 51 to just be even, after when I started season 2, but I got a little bit too ambitious for my own shoes, and all in all, I feel like I put out some really great episodes for you guys to reflect on. But to hear some of the individual experiences and expertise, I'm really glad for this season. Without further ado, I want to thank you guys first and foremost, for your continued support. You guys backing your words of encouragement, but also not only your support for me, you guys have supported people who have came on here, shared their life, their experiences, their businesses, and what have you. So thank you for that. And I just ask that you guys continue to do it and continue to lift those individuals up, and what have you. If you're just tuning in and you do not know who I am, perhaps you've made it this far. My name is Michael D. Davis Thomas, aka MDDT Speaks. I spent a little bit over 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system. Portion of that starting out on the juvenile side and making my way through ward status to being all of foster care. And aged out, started advocating at 15. When I aged out, I continued advocating throughout advocating, working in congregate care, to working in juveniles, to doing policy work nationally, statewide, locally, helping build programs. You name it, I've done it, in a sense or in a scope or within an internship in the child welfare realm. So really well-rounded in this. But that's enough about me. I'm not going to ramble on because you guys know I can talk. I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves.
Hello, Stormy Lukasavage. I've been an advocate in this field since 2010, and I entered foster care at the age of 15. I've worked with top agencies such as Congressional Coalition for Adoption on Institute, Foster Club, the Children's Bureau, among others, and I'm very much involved within my state of Kansas in advocacy and continue working there on the home front.
Awesome. It's a privilege to have you on. I believe I met you, Stormy, in 2019 at NFYI Shadow Day. And if you guys don't know me, so this is how, you guys are. I've got this question a lot. A lot of people have asked me, how are you connected to all these people? I promise you. So when I went to Shadow Day or when I first started out advocating, I asked everybody I encountered, whether they were somebody or whoever, for their business cards. The other component to that is when I would go places and I was privileged to be seated in the next to other individuals who were doing great work, I humbled myself and I would ask for pictures, contacts, and I stayed in contact with everybody, but also, if I can share anything as a word of encouragement for you guys that are young, just looking to do some of this kind of work, is don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to expand your network. Don't be afraid, even at a young age, to connect and network with people. I believe I was 16, 17 on LinkedIn, trying to connect with people and build my, thing. I didn't know nothing really about it, but I was trying. So that's just my little plug about that, and the connection that me and Stormy have. But without further ado, my first initial question is typically kind of building a timeline of your life, to your now and your expertise, so if you don't mind me asking, share to whatever depth or comfortability, when did your story begin?
I mean, I always bill myself as the first son of Kansas, but true story, I'm not actually from Kansas. I'm from New Mexico. And I entered into Kansas around 5, but that was a whole ugly dispute. It involved a lot of parental custody battles and alleged kidnapping and all that kind of stuff. So when I did come to Kansas, I came to Kansas with a lot of anger issues, and I was very much underdeveloped. I was still in diapers at the age of 5, and I had so much anger issues. So a lot of my early struggles dealt with the fact that I was just another kid overprescribed on drugs because they didn't have anything else to offer me at the time, like therapy or services. So I was this 5-year old all doped up on substances, and I was struggling with being with my biological family being placed. There's a few blank years that are mysteries to me because of the PTSD element that often comes with being involved in foster care. And so I believe I was placed with a friend of the family for 3 years until she unfortunately died from breast cancer. And then after that, I was placed in with my mom and my stepfather, who was 6'7", 300 pounds, and extremely abusive, both physically and verbally. So there was a lot of situations where I should have been involved in foster care a lot younger than I was because I entered foster care at the age of 15. So because of that, and because of the fact that I was such a kid in a spot where I couldn't really do anything, I was a kid in the middle of the country, in the middle of nowhere, and middle of nowhere, Kansas. So because of that, my voice wasn't getting heard, and I was being abused in some very mean ways. So outside for 4 years, I was only allowed to go to school, and I was only allowed to come outside to do hard physical labor. So here I was, this 11-year-old kid chopping wood in the middle of extremely snowy Kansas and doing other stuff that young people should not be exposed to. So because of that, that situation escalated to the point where I was in school one day, and I was this kid in school who had a reputation for not being the nicest person on the block because I didn't go to school with fancy clothes because we lived in extreme poverty. So in the winter, the water would freeze over. Oftentimes, there'd be bugs in my food at home. Uh, I had slept in a room where it was exposed to the winter and the weather. So oftentimes I had to worry about snakes and spiders in my bed, and all that kind of stuff. So that made me a very resentful teenager, still coming to grips with the loss of my adoptive figure who died from breast cancer earlier on. And because of that, and because of the fact that I wasn't really allowed to cry about that situation, there was so much resentment in my life. So that situation ended up coming to a head at 15 when my stepfather tried to kill my mother. And because of that, I was in school, just minding my own business. But I felt like my time, something was going to happen because I've learned in life that you always have to trust your gut instinct. Your gut instinct is the one thing that never lied to you. So for like the last few days before that, I took a t-shirt and I went to my friends and I asked, hey, could everyone sign this t-shirt? I don't know what my next step is going to be or whether I was going to be on this planet for much longer because that was my reality. And so I remember being in school one day, cops came up to me and put the handcuffs on my back because everyone thought I was some punk kid with a bad attitude beginning of high school. And I did get detention a few times. That's a story for another time. But yeah, I ended up getting dragged out of my small time school. And for then on, it was just about me and my stepsister. We were bouncing around for a little bit. I remember sleeping in offices, public offices, and the such. And because of that, uh, she ended up actually getting placed with her kinship grandmother. So she landed in kinship, but the process wasn't as smooth for me. So I would be just traveling all around Kansas, dipping from small town to small town. And here's a fun Kansas fact for everyone. Kansas has the most counties per any state. So there's over 100 counties, which is excessive because there's barely just like a million people, maybe 3 million people in the state of Kansas. So I'm just going to all these ghost towns that no one has ever heard of, not knowing where I was going to sleep at night until finally I ended up staying with my grandma because they got that approved. And thank God, because my last placement, my last short-term residential placements, I accidentally broke a window, and luckily for me, there was like about 10 other boys in that short term. So I'm like, I am moving the bed over the window, I am hiding it, and I'm like, whoever house that was, I am so sorry about breaking your window right before when it happened. Just an awkward time in my life. So there I am with my kinship. And this is where I really just first got into advocacy because it was at 15 when I in the middle of summer, living with my grandma on my stepdad's side. So I was there and I got a poster saying, "Hey, come do this summer conference." And as a kid who was practically locked up for 4 years, I was craving any form of socialization as possible, even though I was this awkward, chubby kid who had a huge speech impediment because of the abuse that I had to endure and because of the over medication and all that kinds of stuff. So I couldn't say S, I couldn't say L. So saying Stormy Lukasavage came out to Tumi Ukovich, and somehow I became a public speaker because that's the kind of field you go into when you have a speech impediment. So, yeah, there I was at my first summer conference, and I was among about over 100 other peers. And this is why I always tell people that socialization and just living as much of a normal life as possible is one of the most important things when you're in foster care, because that's how you connect and that's how you integrate yourself in a society when you come from this culture of trauma, because you have to find a new normalization. So there I am at my first advocacy experience. And I remember talking to the state council because I was interested in it. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to get ready to head to New Orleans." And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, that this opportunity was out there. So I joined up with them that same year. And so that's kind of the start of my advocacy career. Now, unfortunately, kinship placement didn't last too long for me because the goals of the state and my goals were not the same. Uh, that's where I was in one of my roughest time periods ever because the state wasn't listening to my needs and my voice because they weren't providing me a safe space to tell my side of the story. Like, am I really going to talk about my needs in front of this huge man who is super abusive? Because that was what the state wanted, was reintegration, and they felt that it was something that was capable, but it wasn't. So that's where my kinship placement was going to go before I ended up getting placed into an actual foster care home. So there I am in my foster care home, and the same stuff that a lot of other youth have to go through, like being left out of Christmas photos, being excluded from like this, being called their children, and just feeling that kind of awkward way. Uh, Having to change my religious mindset in the middle of that, because I came from this Mormon household to a Protestant one, which are widely different, and being told this is your new religion, same God, different laws, and just being told to kind of accept that. Uh, it really kind of messed with me in a way, and it made me fall out of religion. And so there was other factors, but reintegration was still being marched forward with. So I had to take steps that I I don't agree with. And these were some of the hardest things I ever had to go through, because how do you get the attention of the people in charge when you can't speak? You do something rash. And in my case, that rash action was self harm. So, because of that incident and the nature of it, I almost actually lost my left arm from infection. And I was placed, and everyone who saw that looked at me as some kind of freak. And I still have those scars on my arm, but they're covered up with tattoos because you know me, Michael. I am a huge tattoo addict. Do you see my tattoos?
Definitely.
I was rocking them in 2019 too. So, but yeah. So I was left in a state of disrepair when it came to my mental mindset. And the next thing that happened after that, I was placed into a treatment facility where the conditions were harsh. I was seeing youth uh, just get tossed around by staff. So it would be these two big dudes, at least two, and they would just take a kid, lift one up by each side, and toss them into a room where it was, you had to land for yourself pretty safely to get that level of protection. And that was my first time being exposed to this kind of condition where I was treated criminal. And because of that, I've worked in criminal justice settings where I've advocated against that kind of treatment. And a lot of my policies have revolved around that. So after that experience, this is where I came into my group home setting because I was only in foster care for 3 years. And this wild journey seems like it might take up a lot more time than that, but I assure you it was only 3 years. Uh, I ended up getting placed in the group home where I learned that group home life was way different than anything anyone could ever prepare you for. It was a survival of the fittest aspect. My first night in the group home, I still remember to this day as being one of the wildest, crazy events that have ever happened. One of the staff actually got fired the next day because they found her in a bathtub with 4 to 5 other kids. And this group home, max capacity was 14. So that was almost half of the kids there. And that was the kind of crazy events that was almost natural to happen there. We lived in this haunted group home, this one long hallway that was super haunted with ghosts. Now, I don't know if all the people who watch this believe in ghosts, but let me tell you, a haunted group home is something different. It is, there was some times there, but it was survival of the fittest for the most part. That's where I really learned how to fight and self-defend because you would get into a fight frequently. There were days where I fought at least once or twice, and the staff would watch it and they would cheer. It was almost like a wrestling event. Like I remember one time I broke some kid's arm, and that was kind of the normal. So yeah, that's where I learned how to self-defend because that's just normality right there. So we had those kinds of events. I remember one of my other strong memories was I remember seeing this kid come in the hallway and her legs were just covered in blood from self-harm. And because she wasn't getting the treatment she deserved, because group homes were punitive back in the early 2010s. And I'm sure there's still, unfortunately, environments where they are more punitive than therapeutic. Um, and when I said punitive, we would each receive a roll of quarters for a laundry and bus pass. and if we misbehaved and any slights, we would get those quarters uh, taken away. So I remember on the Sunday, we were told, "Hey, Stormy, you have to do X amount of job applications." And I was like, "Cool. The bus doesn't run on Sunday. Can you give me a lift?" And they were like, "No, you got to do it yourself." And we didn't have access to computers because there was only one computer, no Wi-Fi or anything. So there was one computer in the group home, and the staff were on it doing their reports and stuff like constantly. So at most, you could probably get like 5 minutes, but that was not enough time to do X amount of job applications. So I remember specifically walking 20 miles in 100-degree heat to do a certain amount of job applications, just so I wouldn't get my laundry money taken away. Those were the kinds of conditions that we lived in, youth fighting. And my way out, and this is why advocacy was so important for me, was it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to change the world, I wanted to save people. That wasn't it for me. It was just a way out at the time. And over time, I have grown to appreciate how much advocacy has helped me and can help other people. And my mindset has changed from being self saving to trying to help as many people as I can by developing policies that actually have some level of impact. So that's the start of that was my foster care journey before I transitioned into college, in which I ended up graduating in 2019 with my bachelor's in criminal justice. Oh, and I remember this one of the most impactful moments before I met you, Michael. Uh, I was interning at my local correctional facility, and this was at least 5 years after I left to go home. And I asked the students, "How many of you have experience with foster care?" And this was an adult jail, so there were a lot of different answers, but most of the hands raised up. And then after I left that, one of the students came up to me and he was like, "Hey, do you remember me, Stormy? I used to be your best friend from the group home." And he was my best friend from the group home. And that just goes to remind me that I'm extremely lucky in the fact that I I got into this good spot that I am today, because most of the other people there who weren't given chances, they either locked up, homeless, or dead. And unfortunately, that's the reality of foster care, a byproduct of being the reality of group home living. So that's why I advocate against group home living. I advocate for the juvenile justice sect, the educational sect, and among other sections.
Thank you for sharing that, Stormy. I can relate so much, to your story, and your experience in some of those areas. Much like yourself, your experience in group homes and facilities in those spaces, kind of weighed you to go to criminal justice. I started out in school in criminal justice. And what pulled me away, because I wanted to be a police officer, and then I was like, they want me to cut my hair. That's out. And then I was like, I could be a lawyer and what have you. And I just like, this is a lot of schooling. And then I was like, all right, that's out. So I ended up switching over to social work. And then my experience of social work, granted, love all the social workers. I commend you guys. It's a very strong thing for you guys to do. So I appreciate you guys. It wasn't for me. And the reason I say it wasn't for me is because personally, I live a life, I lead my life with my faith. And I felt I was being pulled to do more macro work. Not saying that social workers can't do macro work, but for the work that I'm trying to do, like this podcast, be able to go do advocacy events and stuff like that, I knew that was going to need a certain perspective, and policy and stuff like that. So I went the more policy and political science route to be able to do things and on an executive level of policy and legislation and different things like that. But I say all that to say, I would love to say that outcomes are different, but much like that last piece you said, we find ourselves, whether we walking down the street or we happen to go do something. For you, it was an internship. For me, it was a few days ago, on Facebook, a guy that came out of, facility, with me, um, just having a really, bad bunch of luck, and I was happy to hear from him because it's the first person out of hundreds that I've stayed connected with that isn't dead, locked up, or hooked onto a substance or what have you, and it's unfortunate because most people who experience foster care tend to end up experiencing the criminal justice system. Most people who experience juvenile tend to end up becoming repeat offenders, and all the stats behind all those different things. But it feels as such like it's Russian roulette when you when you're in foster care. You don't know if you're gonna become an advocate. You don't know if you're gonna become the next president. You don't know if you're gonna, make it. As soon as you get out there, it's like you take that step, and it's like, okay, all right, we gonna try our best to make it through this day, this year, and that's the reality, because once you get out of these systems, unfortunately, it's a lot of good. And I don't want to take away from that. It is a lot of good. You have those moments in the system where you're like, wow, like, am I still here? Like you have those moments, those days. I can remember some really awesome times I've had in some of these congregate care facilities, but I remember a lot more negative. So it's like hard. Like I remember good, like I had that one staff that really did this and it's really cool. And then so many other staff that were abusive, that contribute to the problem, that, watch people fight, egged it on, use the children as scapegoats to keep their job, all these different things, so it's really hard. And that's why when you hear a lot of individuals who've experienced the system, especially throughout my seasons, season 1 and season 2, you're going to hear a trend of individuals saying, if they experience congregate care or foster homes, that, there's a disparity in good, and it's real. I'm not saying that it's not out there, and I would love to be able to come on this podcast and present to you guys about greatness in the foster care system. But then I have to be real. Would I need to have this podcast if it was all good? So coming back around, I really appreciate you sharing that and being vulnerable and open, because you touched on so many significant things that I believe is going to impact a lot of people. I didn't even know, like, I'm from the Midwest, and I'm trying to remember where Kansas is, but I do know it's, kind of like a farm state, so there's a lot of barren and a lot of land. There's a lot of driving, so I could just only imagine, and I was just imagining through your eyes what it's like for individuals who live in those states where there's a whole bunch of counties, they endure abuse, and it's kind of like everybody tend to their own space. You on your farm, you on your, you tend to your own land. I'm thinking of like Iowa, use like these really secluded rural, states, and I just imagine, as you were sharing that piece of your story, how many other people experienced that but never got out?
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to share anything on that, but it's like there's, on one hand, I'm like, where's the check and balance? But the other hand, like, check and balance now, when you tell people to check and balance, it starts to be policing. So it's like, how do you be there for those youth? So I want to ask on that piece, you had experienced abuse, but also, your reaction to it in school was a little bit different. So did you ever ask for help or try to talk, to anyone? And how did that, what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did ask for help one time, but because it's a small community and people talk, my cries for help were reneged, and I ended up getting the stuffing beat out of me when I got home.
Mhm. Yeah, and and that speaks volumes because I'm like, okay, you ask for help, person you ask for help, and it gets to the other person. It speaks to like what kind of culture is in that environment. Like, is this a norm? Because if I ask for help, you're supposed to go get help. You ain't supposed to go come back around and be like, oh, is this really happening to what's her name? Like this is a dangerous situation, but I don't know. Like I've heard so many people, in my experience, speaking on panels with others, who've like, oh, well, my worker came in and wanted to, ask me all these bunch of questions, but I was right there in front of my abuser. So I'm trying to figure out, like, why would you ask me all these questions and think I'm about to be open about this if I don't see a safety net? But wow.
Yeah, it
So
was nonsensical to me. I mean, that's just common sense.
yeah. So you talked about, all these traumatic events, and that's to say the least, that you experienced. Your life has truly been a journey. What was your mental health, throughout all this? What was like I don't know, I know self-care and all these things can kind of be more adult kind of terms, but what did that look like throughout your adolescence experience and all this? Like, because I know you mentioned, self-harm and all, and experiencing that, to cry out for help, but I know as you spoke about it, that wasn't your first go-to. So you tried other avenues. So what was your mental health or your mental state throughout this? And how does that reflect yourself today, as far as what you do and how you take care of yourself for self-care?
I mean, I was jaded. Like, if you had to put a picture of jaded in the dictionary, that would have been me. Because, I mean, before I entered foster care, I was living 4 years in this one environment,
Mhm.
practically with a gun to my head, being told, screw up or do this and you'll die. So it was just like, it's like it made me fearless in kind of a way, but it also made me so jaded, and it didn't help. And this is why you always have to practice strategic sharing, and you have to practice rewarding those properly who share the story strategically. Because my whole advocacy career, and this is kind of a brief layout of advocacy, my advocacy career. That 9 years I was in the state of Kansas advocacy, doing that before I made it breakthrough to the national circuit, which is kind of foster club, shadow day, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, so those 9 years, I never heard of the concept of strategic sharing. So basically, what I would do when I got invited to these events would be that I would go into a panel or do a Q&A in front of a bunch of strangers who weren't super receptive. And I would spill my piece of pie, my drama into all these individuals. And I do it for a slice of pizza, maybe $20, because I was a glorified sob story, because that's what gets people's attention.
Mhm.
Uh, and credit to me for carrying on this, because I've turned that sob story into the semi career that I currently have going right now. But it's been a long time of kind of going through that and kind of healing from being jaded in so much. To this day, I could spill every personal detail of my life and not really have it bother me. And it can be the most horrifying thing ever to other people. But to me, it was just like it was my life. It happened. And I've said the same story 1,000 times.
Mhm.
Like, one of the most mortifying experiences of my life was when I submitted a piece of paper for an audience, a play kind of, and it was attached anonymously. And it was kind of like my story, my life, and the things that happened. And I go to watch that story, and the actor does a phenomenal job of playing me. but everyone knew it was me. So everyone knew at my college that these were the events that were happening to me. So it was just insane to see my own life story play out, and everyone knew uh, that was me. So I hope that kind of answers the questions a little bit.
It does, and I appreciate that. I only have a couple more questions for you. You've given us so much, and truly, I've done a couple of these, and I like, no one is the same. Um, but I like it hits different for me. And nothing against, you know, some of the women that I've had on here, but it hits different for me, being a male who's experienced this system, hearing other males who've experienced the system, nationally, and who've made it through because, it's not, we can talk about statistics, and outcomes for males coming out of the system and not ended up in the criminal justice system or dead, and then that trickles down to the particular rates and all those other things. But, I don't see a lot of great outcomes, so I really appreciate at a very high regard, meeting other, men who've made it out, who've recovered, who've did the work, and are paying it forward, and not saying it's nothing against the individuals who are still working the process to be in a place of recovery, not saying anything against the individuals who, are in a place of stagnant. I hope that you guys that, may come across this and hear that, I hope that you connect with me, I'd love to help you, start on your journey. Outside of that, everyone has a unique place of thriving that works for them. And success is not linear, and that's something that I've been kind of pushing for a while now because the system has a way of telling us, well, you got to go to college, you make it, you do this and that, and the third, and it seems like a very straight line, but they don't tell you, look, you have to pay taxes. You might got to pick up 2 or more jobs while you're going to school, depending if you get on campus living. Even if you get campus living, then you might need to take out a loan because you can't afford, anything other than ramen noodles. So, all these different real life things, those are left out outside of you. Just you get there, you make it. So like I've really been taking on the initiative as a person who lived through this, who's made mistakes, who messed up credit, who's been evicted, who's been homeless as an adult, who's totaled a car, who've had tickets, who's been to jail, as a person who's lived through this. This is currently, as an adult, these are things I've experienced, being completely transparent with you guys, that it's okay to not be okay, for one. It's okay to make mistakes because those help us learn. It's okay to thrive in your own right. And with that being said, my next question to you, Stormy, is what does life look like for you now and going forward?
I have exciting news for the general world. In case you know me, but you haven't heard the news, I am going to be a father soon.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things going on in my life right now. I'm still on the job hunt. Um, I've got excellent experience. Checked out my LinkedIn. It's at Stormy Lukasavage. But do that after you check out Resilience, Voices, and Beyond new YouTube channel because they have excellent content. And I also am a cat daddy. So as you can see here, there's going to be a cat on the edge of the screen. So maybe use that for the thumbnail.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate it. And then that plug, you guys, here's a lived experience individual with, a wealth of experience of life. I would mention that first, but also, a graduate, and I believe you have your bachelor's, in criminal justice.
Yep,
bachelor's in criminal justice, so he's educated as well, has, internships, volunteer experience, advocacy experience, so if you're looking for someone with lived experience, or just looking for someone to, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the lived experience. It's a great guy, This is me. I'm vouching for you, So anybody out there listening, great guy, and he's about to be a dad, so diapers are not cheap, So, but no, I really appreciate that. And my last two questions are, what advice would you like to leave here today?
I put my quote as living my best life. And I haven't always lived up to that standard of positivity because you need to be positive in the aspects that you do. People don't want to hire Debbie Downers, and people don't want to work with people that complain about every little aspect. And I've worked with these kinds of people, and God bless them. They are amazing in other departments. But when it comes down to who I would rather work with, I'd rather work with someone who was positive and came with a lot of energy than someone who was polished. But their attitude and their mindset about everything was just so negative. So I always put my advice as living my best life. And this is going to be my model for 2023. Because when I came back from doing my congressional internship and there weren't job opportunities, for a while it got me down, but I am back on my feet. I'm back to being positive, living, and I am living my best life, even with the herniated disc I have in my back.
Definitely. And I know you to be a very positive, optimistic, life of the party type of guy. Always even keel with a smile on your face. And I really appreciate that. Because it takes individuals like yourself, when everyone else is going through it, to lift that room up, and that's one thing I know you to be, and I can appreciate that, from my own experience. Any last comments? And this is a space for if you got a rap song, an album, book coming out, whichever, shameless plugs, whichever, how people can contact you, how people can follow you, or whatever you're doing, feel free to share.
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you again for having me on your podcast, now available on YouTube. And because when I first saw this series, I was like, I knew this was something that I wanted to be on. And I am so honored that you invited me here. To me, that is a career highlight for me. And so I'm just amazed to have this opportunity in this platform to just be able to speak to other individuals, those with lived experience and those who don't have that lived experience, who want to know how to get involved. It's just amazing to be here again. To plug for me, I do have a LinkedIn account where you can connect with me. Stormy Lukasavage, one of the people with the most unique and awesome names in the country. It's not hard to find. You please reach out if you have any job opportunities for me. Dad's got a dad. And I'm so grateful to be here again.
Awesome. Well, it's truly been a privilege. This won't be the last time we connect and chat. Awesome. I truly been honored and privileged to have you on. And I definitely took a lot, notes from your experience, but also your expertise, and observing, the work you've been doing, nationally through your policy that you proposed and wrote, through other things that you've done. So I appreciate that. Guys, this is episode, 32 of season 2. We are trickling down. But first and foremost, we talked about a lot of intricate things that could be potentially triggering. I just ask that you guys, if you were triggered or something kind of stirred something up, that you take some time before you do anything. If you're listening to this on your way to work, before you go into that job, take some time to process, to get yourself back to baseline, and if it's, something a little bit more deeper, feel free to reach out to myself. I'm pretty sure if you have any questions for Stormy, feel free to reach out to him at his LinkedIn. I'm sure he'd be happy, to answer any questions, but if you're looking for any resources towards mental health resources, foster care recovery, or what have you, I would love to help you. towards that journey or what have you for yourself. I want to mention again, success is not linear, and everyone has their own path to thriving in their own life, and it's up to you to find that. It's not up to me, it's not up to the next person or whoever to say how you're supposed to live your life. I just ask that you be safe, you be honest with yourself, you be open with yourself, and you understand your value and your worth, and you find peace within all that. If you're doing that, you living your best life. you know. So with that being said, it is winter for some states. Some states still feeling some sun, woohoo. Uh, but for those states, feeling the winter or what have you, it's cold and flu season. Influenza is really going rapid, here in the Midwest. I don't know about anywhere else. So please take care of yourself. I know COVID was, it's still going rapid in some other countries and different things like that. So please, do your part to take care of yourself. We all are part of this huge village. So by you doing your part, that helps the next person, so stay safe out there, stay secure. And without further ado, I only got, one more episode and then my finale episode, and I'll be done with season 2. And you guys may be wondering, what does that look like? What is going to happen? Are you just falling off the face of the earth? So I wanted to be able to do some community things. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the funding to, get out in the community and things like that. So I'm still looking for funding to be able to travel and get out to some of these communities who are deeply impacted by, removals in the foster care system, and hoping that I can bridge the gap between communities and social services to be able to help, in that fight towards family preservation and prevention efforts, but also to lessen the loads of foster homes and to lessen the need for congregate care. Because as we know, and I know some other people are in business with congregate care, but I am not a fan. I'm gonna tell you this. If you come to my show, I've worked for them. I've had some people on here who run them. Me, I do believe they can work with a lot of reform, but the type of reform that's needed, the cost doesn't weigh the benefits of some of those people. So, if we're not going to do it right, I'm a definite person of, okay, well, let's figure out how we can help still save these children, be able to save the children and help them to less experience of trauma. I can't take away all the trauma, but less experience of trauma in their lives. So that's what it looks like next for me. I hope you guys have a good night, good morning, good whenever you're listening to this. Thank you guys for tuning in to Resilient Voices NFYI. Talk to you guys soon.